Hi, continuing to read The Four Signs of a Dynamic Catholic, and I'm reading about the second sign, study. So I'm going to read excerpts of Chapter 3. The Genius of Catholicism. From time to time, we all need to take a step back from life to take another look at who we are, where we are, and what we're doing. If we don't do this regularly, we tend to get caught up in our own little world, and that is a dangerous place because it distorts the way we see the world at large. And the way we see the world determines the way we live our lives. How do you see the world? What's your worldview? Our worldview constantly needs challenging. Your worldview is made up of a million thoughts, ideas, beliefs, and prejudices. It's unique to you and largely formed by your past experiences and education. For these reasons, your worldview has blind spots and is imperfect. My worldview is distorted and imperfect in the same way. These blind spots and distortions cause us all sorts of problems in life, especially in relationships. This is why God is constantly challenging our worldview. Jesus challenged the worldview of every person he encountered. Zacchaeus, the woman at the well, the woman caught in adultery and her accusers, Pontius Pilate, Herod, the chief priests, the scribes, the rich young man, Lazarus, the disciples. Jesus came, among other things, to bring us to a new worldview. For many years, I have been speaking about the genius of Catholicism, a comprehensive and coherent worldview that starts with a vision for the human person. Have you ever encountered a single idea that turned your life upside down? I had an experience like this when I was about 15 years old. I was born into a Catholic family and baptized as a child, went to Catholic grade school and high school, went to Mass on Sundays, and prayed before meals. But I never really got it. It wasn't until I encountered one idea that turned my life inside out, but right side up, that Catholicism clicked for me. The idea that caused it all to fall into place for me was God's vision for the human person, passed on by the Church. It's a very simple idea. God calls you to holiness, and everything that happens in your life, every triumph, trial, and tragedy is an opportunity to grow in holiness. When you work hard and pay attention to the details of your work, you grow in virtue, in character, and holiness. When you're patient with your little sister or a customer who drives you crazy, you become more perfectly who God created you to be, and you grow in holiness. When you develop a daily routine of prayer and practice it persistently, you develop a closer relationship with God, and you grow in holiness. Every moment has meaning. Every moment of every day presents you with an opportunity to grow in holiness by loving God, loving your neighbor, and becoming more perfectly the unique and wonderful person God created you to be. This was the idea that captured my attention and led me to truly embrace Catholicism for myself, because it revealed the true meaning and purpose of life. And it happened in a way that allowed me to see the connection between the individual events of my daily life and what God was inviting me to through the Church. This is a vital connection that the Church is failing to make for too many people. It's crucial that we make the connection between the ordinary activities of life and the dream God has for each person. At that early time in my life, I saw that everything I did mattered. In every moment, I was either celebrating or betraying my best self. God has an incredible dream for each and every one of us. God wants you to become the best version of yourself. What makes a good friend? Someone who helps you become the best version of yourself. What makes a good meal? Food that helps you become the best version of yourself. What makes good books, movies, and music? Those that inspire you to become the best version of yourself. What is the meaning and purpose of marriage? Husband and wife coming together, challenging and encouraging each other to become the best version of themselves, and then raising children and teaching them to celebrate the best version of themselves. What is the meaning of work? Is it making money? No. The primary value of work is that when we work hard, we become a better version of ourselves. Every time I become a better version of myself, in even the smallest way, I become a better husband, father, son, brother, manager, neighbor, parishioner, citizen, and Catholic. If you extend the idea one step further, you discover that every time you become a better version of yourself, your parish becomes a better parish, the company you work for becomes a better organization, and your country becomes a better nation. Everything makes sense in relation to this single idea. Life is about saying yes to the things that help you become the best version of yourself, and no to the things that don't. Life is about searching each moment and discovering how that moment is inviting you to become the best version of yourself. A world without truth. There is genius in Catholicism, but the world doesn't see it that way. Today's secular culture rejects the Catholic worldview and instead chooses relativism as its champion. So what is relativism? It is the theory that there are no absolute truths, but rather all truth is relative. That is, something that is true for you may not necessarily be true for me. This leads to an environment in which every person can do whatever he or she wants to. The problem is, most of us don't think enough about life, and little bits of errant philosophies like relativism can stick to us easily enough as we make our way through this world. They are presented under the guise of being open-minded or tolerant, but it is good to be close-minded about certain things, even before you try them. I'm close-minded about putting my hand in a chainsaw. It is good for me to be close-minded about this. Being close-minded is not always bad, and it is good to be intolerant of some things. You should be intolerant of some things. Relativists will say you cannot impose your morality on others, that you cannot legislate your own personal beliefs. But if you saw someone beating a child, wouldn't you try to stop that person? By doing so, you would be imposing your morality upon him or her, but it would still be the right thing to do. Some things are right, and some things are wrong. But relativists will not concede this. And doesn't all legislation impose someone's personal beliefs or a group's personal beliefs on the whole society? There is no moral way to sympathize with immoral actions, and it is necessary to be intolerant of some things. Besides, you don't tolerate things that are good, right? You don't have to. You only have to tolerate things that are unpleasant. The real problem with relativism is that if there is no place for truth, there is no place for wisdom. Wisdom, by definition, is the ability to discern or judge what is true, good, right, or lasting. Relativism makes wisdom irrelevant. In the Bible, we read the story of young Solomon becoming king after his father David died. He was unsure of himself and concerned about his ability to lead his people. Then one night, Solomon had a dream. God appeared to him and said, "Ask whatever you wish for me, and I will give it to you." If God appeared to you and said he would give you anything you asked of him, what would you request? Solomon asked for wisdom, saying to the Lord, "Give me an understanding heart to judge your people and distinguish right from wrong." 1 King 3:9. Solomon asked God to give him wisdom. Wisdom is one of the goals of the Christian life. With every passing year, our ability to discern right from wrong should increase. But the world often clouds our judgment. There's another reason we need to step away from the world regularly to see how the world is affecting our judgment. Pray for wisdom, just as Solomon did. Ask God to give you wisdom, the ability to discern what is true, good, right, and lasting. Wisdom is truth lived. It takes wisdom to walk with God. The worldview today's secular culture sets forth takes all the meaning out of life, empties life of joy, leaves us unmoored from truth, and easily susceptible to manipulation, fills us with depression and despair, enslaves us, and creates an ever-present fog of confusion. On the other hand, the worldview God sets before us through the church may bring with it great demands, but it also brings great clarity. and clarity is refreshing and liberating. In the joy of that clarity, we discover that everything in life has meaning, that every moment can be grasped for a greater purpose. Truth and deceit are all around us. Truth leads to fullness of life, and deceit seeks to rob us of that fullness in 1,000 different ways. But we do not simply stumble into truth. Truth must be sought with humility and perseverance. One of the most beautiful lines I have ever read is the opening of John Paul II's The Splendor of Truth. The splendor of truth shines forth in all the works of the Creator, and, in a special way, in man, created in the image and likeness of God. Truth enlightens man's intelligence and shapes his freedom, leading him to know and love the Lord. If truth does shape our freedom, then without it, there's only slavery. What place is there in your life for truth and wisdom? What value do you place in these things? Are you ready to begin a quest to seek truth in a new way? The genius of Catholic teaching is that it brings us clarity. We may not always appreciate the clarity that the Church delivers, but it is always better than the slavery and confusion that philosophies like relativism bring about. Seek that clarity, and when you find it, embrace it. People deserve answers to their questions. This can all seem a little heavy, I suppose. Holiness and relativism. But maybe that's just because so much in our lives has become light and superficial. We live in a time of moral and ethical confusion. We live in a time that's plagued by a crisis of purposelessness. We have stopped thinking about how we should live and have given ourselves to living however we want to live. Yet, we have failed to employ even the most basic self-observation that would have led us long ago to the conclusion that doing whatever we want does not bring us any lasting satisfaction. The confusion of our times means that more people have more questions about Catholicism than ever before. Some of these questions get articulated, but the great majority of them remain unspoken, bouncing around in people's hearts and minds as they make their way through life. The reason so many questions remain unspoken is because most people don't know whom to ask. Out of this situation emerges one of my firmest convictions. People deserve answers to their questions, especially questions surrounding the faith. Not just generic one-size-fits-all answers, but deeply personal answers that reach into their lives, meet them in their daily struggles and confusion, and deliver hope and clarity. They deserve answers that animate their lives in a uniquely Christian way, answers they can live. One thing that became abundantly clear through the research is that when you start talking to Catholics about their faith, you discover an almost universal inferiority complex around how little they know about Catholicism. Most Catholics are afraid they're going to be asked a question by a colleague, a child, a relative, or even a stranger. We actually fear that wonderful, grace-filled moment when someone has the courage to ask a question about our faith. I've learned that there are answers to our Catholic questions, and the answers are beautiful. But in order to see the beauty of the Catholic faith, you have to be solely interested in seeking the truth, which means you have to set aside your own agenda and whatever prejudices life has burdened you with. The more I asked questions, the more I discovered answers, the more my confidence grew in the Catholic Church and her teachings. The questions not only led me to individual answers, but they allowed me to discover the coherent, comprehensive worldview that is Catholicism. Here I discovered that for 2,000 years, the best Catholic minds have been gathering wisdom on every topic that touches the human experience, and that this gathered wisdom makes up a great treasure chest. There are 3 lessons here for us. 1, each day we need to develop our store of knowledge about the Catholic faith so that we can live it more deeply with every passing day, and so we can answer more and more questions other people have about the faith. 2, it's important that we are very clear that we don't need to have all the answers. We just need to know what resources will lead us to solid answers to Catholic questions. And 3, Together as a church, we need to get better at articulating answers to people's questions in ways that resonate with their lives. Learnings from highly engaged Catholics. Dynamic Catholics can teach us an awful lot about how we can learn more about our faith. They've struggled with it in a very personal way, but the fruit of their struggle is that they have identified a path that the average Catholic can look at and say, I can do that. Let's explore the traits that set highly engaged Catholics apart in this area. It is here that we encounter study, the second sign of a dynamic Catholic, in a very practical way. The research revealed that highly engaged Catholics are continuous learners. On average, they spend 14 minutes each day learning more about the faith. They see themselves as students of Jesus and his church, and they proactively make an effort to allow his teachings to guide and form them. A number of questions emerge from these findings. Are you a continuous learner? How much time do you spend each day learning about the faith? Are you a student of Jesus? Are you a student of the Catholic Church? Do you proactively make an effort to allow the teachings of Jesus and his church to guide and form you? As I reflected on these questions, I realized that while the second sign is so simple, activating it in our lives requires real effort. I thought about how many days pass when I don't learn anything new about our faith. I thought about how often in my life I just make decisions without consulting God. All this led me to see that the seemingly small habits, the 4 signs, become incredibly powerful when applied consistently to one's life. Paul advised the Romans, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Romans 12:2. Continuous learning is a process that leads to the renewing of the mind. There is so much to discover about Catholicism. If we spend our whole lives studying it, we would still lie on our deathbeds and marvel at how little we know compared to how much there is to know. So clearly, the meaning of life is not to learn everything there is to know about Catholicism. What we learn from Catholics with vibrant spiritual lives, who live with passion and purpose, is that learning a little bit more about our faith each day fuels our spiritual development and helps us to discover who we truly are and the plan God has for our lives. Most of us are not called to formally study theology, but all of us are called to grow each day in our understanding of the Catholic faith. Without this, we are very quickly and easily become conformed to the world. The next thing we discover in the area of the second sign is that dynamic Catholics have a routine for their continuous learning. Just like with prayer, they don't learn more about their faith merely when they get around to it. It has a place in their day. They have a plan. They have a routine. Some read from a good Catholic book for a few minutes at lunchtime, or before they go to bed at night. Others listen to Catholic CDs while they're exercising. Still others listen to Catholic radio on the way to and from work each day. These are the 3 main forms of daily learning that the 7% identified in their lives. Beyond their daily routine, the 7% are also significantly more likely to attend an adult education program in their parish. They are regular attendees when the parish hosts a speaker. They attend other Catholic events. And more than half of the dynamic Catholics interviewed consider regular retreats or pilgrimages to be a powerful part of their spiritual lives. Dynamic Catholics are hungry to grow spiritually, and they thirst for the truth. The great majority of these highly engaged Catholics have rigorously explored at least one question they've had about Catholicism. More than just asking someone their question or searching for a quick answer on the internet, they really threw themselves into the question or issue. The search for an answer to their most pressing question about the faith almost always brought with it two lessons. First, it's very hard to see the truth while you're in the middle of a situation, especially if the situation is highly charged and emotional. There's a certain detachment that's needed to acknowledge the truth when you do stumble upon it. We are more attached to our agendas and biases than we think. Often those agendas and biases are subconscious, so we're not even aware of how they're influencing us. Fulton Sheen wrote, It is easy to find the truth. It is hard to face it, and harder still to follow it. The second lesson is that disagreeing with the church without a full examination of an issue is prideful and foolish. As I explained in introducing the second sign, even though the 7% tend to know much more about the faith than their counterparts in the 93%, they have a position of humility that is a critical element to the second sign. If they disagree with something the church teaches, they approach the issue by exploring the question, why does the church teach what she teaches? They assume it is unlikely that they know better than 2,000 years of the best Catholic theologians and philosophers. They assume that they may be missing something and go searching for it. From this perspective, they explore what the church teaches to further understand God's way, eager to discover the truth. Our capacity to seek, find, and adopt truth is in direct proportion to our humility. Engagement. The second sign also plays a powerful role in fueling the other three signs. Study fuels prayer, generosity, and evangelization. The more we learn about our faith, the more likely we are to take the spiritual life seriously. Learning about the Catholic worldview and the dignity Jesus ascribes to every human person drives generosity. We see the Catholic vision coming together as we discover answers to questions that have been running around in our minds for some time. The natural reaction then is to want to share that vision and those answers with others. Evangelization, the fourth sign. As we delve more and more into the four signs of a dynamic Catholic, we discovered that they are interconnected in powerful and practical ways, and that they really do hold the seeds for renewal in our lives and our parishes. How do you eat an elephant? Catholicism can be intimidating. Trying to learn more about it can be overwhelming. Knowing where to start can be perplexing. To overcome the obstacles to develop a living and active knowledge of our faith, we are going to turn to one of our key concepts: continuous improvement. Continuous improvement is a long-term approach that seeks to achieve small, incremental changes. Each change can be so small and simple that at the time it seems insignificant. But as you add these changes together over time, they become enormous. The hardest part of doing anything is getting started. The same is true for each of the four signs. A space shuttle uses 96% of its fuel during takeoff. It's getting started that's difficult. That's why we need systems. What was the first thing we identified about dynamic Catholics? They have a daily commitment to prayer, and they have a routine of prayer. Their routine of prayer is a system that allows them to get started. What did we say about most people when they sit down to pray? They see what happens. And what happens? Nothing usually. They lack the routine, the system. In any area, the smallest incremental improvements can produce astounding results over a long period of time. Ignorance of Catholicism is massive. We are aware that the more someone knows about the faith, the more likely he or she is to become highly engaged. Most people don't know where to start. The answer is good old-fashioned books. If you read 5 pages of a great Catholic book every day, you'll be amazed how your knowledge and enthusiasm for the faith will begin to grow. Just 5 pages a day. I hope you're thinking, I can do that. 5 pages a day for a year is 1,825 pages in that year, 18,250 pages in a decade, and 45,625 pages over 25 years. That's 228 books with an average length of 200 pages. If you ask most people to read 45,625 pages of Catholic material, they'd be completely overwhelmed. If you ask most people to commit to reading 228 Catholic books, they'd feel intimidated. But 5 pages a day, we can do that. Continuous improvement. It makes incredible things possible. The world and the culture cannot answer our deepest questions or bring profound meaning to our lives. For answers to our deepest questions, we must turn to God. Only then, through those answers and with an open heart, will our lives be flooded with meaning and purpose. 5 pages a day. I hope you can hear the voice of your best self within you saying, I can do that. If you don't know what books to start with, visit dynamiccatholic.com and request the list of 10 books that changed my life. They are a great place to start. Become a continuous learner and encourage every Catholic you know to do the same. One of the best things about Catholicism is that there are answers. Let's start to fill our hearts and our minds with the truth and goodness of those answers. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.